Hi, and welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this video, we're going to learn the 1 to 5 player game Spell Smashers, designed by Christopher Chung and published by Renegade Game Studios, who helped sponsor this video. Now, they say the pen is mightier than the sword, and that's certainly going to be the case here, because as the monsters gather, the adventurers are going to confront them with their vocabulary. So join me at the table, and let's learn how to play. To set up, you'll place the double-sided town board in the central area with this side face up and this marker on the number 1 space of the round track here. Now the board is marked with various locations, and beside the Tavern, you'll place the ale tokens with their one side face up. The cards with these backs are the quest and armory cards, and you'll shuffle them into separate face-down decks, placing the quests in the guild and the armories in, you guessed it, the armory. And you'll also put the supply of coins nearby as well. Now find these monster crests and place a number of them in a row equal to the number of players. And we're going to set up a 2-player game in this video, so we'll return the rest of them to the box. Next, take all the modifier cards, but find the starting ones which have a star in their top right-hand corner. Shuffle those starting modifiers together and then deal one face up underneath each of the monster crests, returning the rest to the box. The regular modifier cards should be shuffled and then placed in a face-down pile to the side, and then all of these monster tiles are collected together and also shuffled and put face down. Then deal one of these face up into the center of each of the face-up modifier cards, ensuring that all the information there is still visible. Now look at the coin values as shown by this symbol on each modifier and monster combination. Add them together, and then put that number of coins from the supply onto the monster crest above that monster. You'll do this for each combination, adding the depicted coins to the related crests. Near the Alchemist, put the potion tokens separated by type. The cards with these backs are consonant, vowel, and wound cards, which should be shuffled into face-down decks here, leaving room beside all of these for future discard piles. Now to make it a little easier for me to move things around here on the table during this video, I'm going to set many of these components off screen and just bring them back in as necessary. Now have each person take one of these boards and a player aid card to put in front of themselves, along with a ready token with its not ready side face up. Each person also draws 4 consonant and 3 vowel cards as their starting hand, and the player who most recently used a dictionary or fought evil monsters takes this tiebreaker marker. Or you can assign this randomly if you'd like. The next player in clockwise order then takes 1 coin from the supply, and if there was another player, they would get 2 coins, the next would get 3, and so on, until you get back to the tiebreaker, who gets 0 coins. And that's the setup. In Spell Smashers, players will be adventurers fighting monsters to become rich and famous, all through the use of their words. And the game is played over 7 rounds, with each round being broken into 3 phases, starting with the Prepare Words phase. Here, you will first choose the gear you want to have equipped for this round, but since you don't have any new gear yet, we'll talk about this step later. Just note, you'll always start with this weapon printed on your board. Now, using the letters in their hands, each player will secretly form a single word following a few simple rules. First of all, it has to be at least 2 letters long, and it can't be a proper noun, like someone's name. And it can't have apostrophes or dashes either. And you may want to have a dictionary on hand, just in case there's any spelling disputes. After you have your word, flip your token here to the ready side, and once all players are ready, you will all simultaneously reveal the cards making up your word. And if you wish, it can be fun to announce it with a battle cry. Eat garlic, you monsters! I really don't know what this person would say. Careful, monster, after I hit you, you're really gonna pout. Now I should mention, it is possible for a player to accidentally spell their word wrong. And if that happens, they reassemble their hand and build a new legal word. Then it's time for players to determine their initiative, which is the number of letters in their word, not the number of cards. And this is important because, as we'll see later, some cards can have multiple letters. So in fact, this would add 3 to the player's initiative. In this case, though, the player here has an initiative of 6, and this player has 4. The player with the highest initiative will go first in the next phase, and then turn order will continue like that down to the player with the lowest initiative. In the case of a tie, the tie is broken in clockwise order from the person who currently has the tiebreaker marker. Now it's time for the next phase, battling monsters. And here, each player must battle a monster. You can't choose not to. And you'll do this in turns following the initiative order. And when it's your turn, you'll perform a series of steps, starting with choosing a monster. To do this, simply pick one from those in the row here, and it can even be a monster that another player has already battled this round. In this example, we'll choose to target the Bleak Kraken. And then next, you'll deal your damage, and each card in your word will have a listed damage value here, but ignore the symbols by them for now. So in this case, Garlic does 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 damage. However, you need to pay attention to icons that might be showing down here on the modifier card. For example, this symbol on the left means that the monster has a weakness, and the symbol beside it is that weakness. So in this case, the Kraken has a weakness to water, which is a strange weakness for it to have, but I guess it's a pretty bleak Kraken and doesn't see a lot of hope in the world and just wants to get out of the water. When a monster has a weakness like this, you will double the damage from cards that also show that symbol. So actually, Garlic does 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 points of damage. You'll also find other symbols like fire and earth, which other monsters might have a weakness to. We won't go through all the possible symbols on modifier cards, as they are all clearly explained here on the back of the rulebook. Just check these as they come up in your game. But I will point out, this one is just flavor text and not actually a monster ability. Also check your active gear, that is, any weapons or armor you have face up in these two spots, as they may further adjust your damage. As we can see, this one gives +1 damage if your word is at least 5 letters long, which Garlic is. So that means I'm now doing a total of 12 damage. Once you have your total value, take from the crest above your targeted monster coins equal to the damage you're doing. These coins aren't just your reward, but also the life of the monster. So if you empty the crest, you have defeated it. If you do more damage than the coins remaining on the crest, you still only get the coins that are there, ignoring any extras that you would normally be owed, but it's called an overkill, and some other cards will give you a bonus for that. As we'll see later, ale tokens like these may be on monster crests, and as long as you do at least 1 point of damage to a monster with your word, then you will take all of them, even if you didn't kill the monster. These will be worth 1 point each at the end of the game. Any coins and ale you collect during the game are placed beside your board in the area here. Now, whether you defeated the monster or not, you'll suffer wounds equal to the monster's attack strength, which is shown here. Though keep in mind, the modifier card underneath may sometimes add additional wounds. In this case, though, we only have to take 2. And for each wound you are owed, draw a card from this deck and add it to your hand. Now, these are cards that you'll be able to play in future rounds, but they may have multiple letters and can be harder to use. Also, each one will be worth -1 point at the end of the game. If you did defeat the monster, then discard the modifier underneath and claim the tile as a trophy. You'll place it above your board, and not only will this be worth points at the end of the game, but it's also a new letter that you can now use in any of your future words. Although you don't start the game with any, in later rounds you will have quests, and at this time, if you fulfilled the requirements of one or more that you are holding, reveal them and then place them face down under the bottom of your player board. These will be worth points at the end of the game. Finally, discard your word, ensuring that you send the cards to the correct discard piles, and there are reminders here on the front that these are vowels, while the rest here are consonants, so I'll place those in the correct areas. Now the next player in the initiative order attacks a monster, and you'll continue like this until everyone has had a turn. At that point, you'll pass the tiebreaker token to the player who had the lowest initiative, which might be the player who started with the tiebreaker token. You'll remember I said you must always attack a monster during the battle monsters phase, but in rare cases you may not be able to make a legal word. And if so, during the prepare words phase, you'll reveal your hand to prove this to the other players, and then discard all of your vowels and consonants. If you have any wounds, you discard one of those of your choosing, and then you'll refill your hand back up to 7 cards, taking any combination of consonants and or vowels, but keeping in mind that wounds that you're holding count against that total of 7 cards. Either way, you can draw 1 card at a time as you decide what you want to take next. Now, if you still can't spell a legal word with this new hand, then you must skip the Battle Monsters phase, and when the Tiebreaker token is passed, it will go to you. Now, before moving on to the next phase, I want to point out a couple of important options players have in future rounds when preparing their words. If you have wounds, as mentioned, you'll now be able to add their letters to your words, and these will also have a damage value and an element type as shown. So in this case, I have spelled string using 2 different wounds. Also, if you have a monster trophy, you can use its letter in future words, and this will also have its own damage value and an element symbol. So here, I've spelled strike. Now, some of these monster tiles will have a wild symbol, which means when used in a word, it can be any element you like, earth, fire, or water. In any case, when you use a wound in a word, you will discard it along with your other letter cards at the end of your turn in the battle phase. But trophies you used are not discarded. You'll instead return it to the space above your player board. Now we move to the Visit Town phase, where each player first draws 2 quests from this deck, privately examines them, chooses 1 to keep, and the other they return to the bottom of the deck. Once all of the players have done this, then each player will pick one of these buildings on the board to visit, resolving its action. The only exception to this is if you are holding 5 or more wounds, in which case you must go to the Shaman's building for this phase. But either way, players perform this step simultaneously. So let's go through each of the buildings and I'll explain how they work. At the Shaman, you must discard one of your monster trophies if you have one, and if you don't, then you can just ignore this cost. But then you'll discard all of the wounds in your hand. At the Tavern, you pay $3 in coins, and then you gain 1 ale token for each wound card that you are currently holding. So the more wounds you have, the more valuable this action can be. At the beginning of this phase, as we saw, all players got to visit the guild for free, drawing 2 quest cards and picking 1 to keep. But now you can choose this as your building to visit, allowing you to come here again, drawing 2 more quests, picking 1 to keep, and returning the other to the bottom of the deck. Quests that you have will not count against your hand size, but at most you can only have 2 uncompleted quests. So anytime you would have 2 or more, you must discard down to that limit by returning the extras to the bottom of the deck. If you instead choose to visit the Armory, it's going to cost you $5 in coins, and then you will draw 2 cards from this gear deck, picking 1 to keep and returning the other to the bottom of the deck. New gear you collect is placed face up to the left of your board, and you can have as much gear here as you like. Also, from now on, at the start of a new round, you can replace gear you have equipped with those that you have stored. But keep in mind, you can only have 1 active weapon and 1 active armor piece at a time. And this is the symbol for weapons, and this is the symbol for armor. Only the gear in these 2 spaces are considered active during the round, and anytime you replace gear that you have here, you put it to the side for possible use later. Though of course, you can't remove this weapon as it's printed to your board, so you'll just cover it up when you want to replace it. At the Alchemists, you can purchase 1 or more of these potions at their listed prices, but you can never have more than 1 of the same type. And these can be used at any time, so let's quickly go through how each of these work. When battling a monster, you can use an elixir to change the type of damage of any 1 card in your word to any other type. So if I was fighting that bleak kraken again, we saw it was weak to water, and I might want to change this fire to a water symbol so it could do double damage. By using the antidote, you can pick any 1 card in your hand, even a wound, discard it, and then draw a new consonant or vowel card to replace it. While battling a monster, you can use the tonic to change any 1 of your letters to any other letter of your choosing. You can even target wound cards or monster tiles. And if you target a wound, just keep in mind the tonic will only change 1 of the letters on it. But in this case, I'm going to target the D and turn it into an I. Now, although the letter will change, I will still use the original letter's damage value and element symbol. After any type of potion is used, you'll return it to the alchemist shop. After visiting the town, the round ends and you'll follow a few steps. First, starting with the player who has the tiebreaker token and going in clockwise order, players will refill their hand to 7 cards. But keep in mind, wounds count against that. So here I could only draw 4 more cards. However, when drawing, you can take from either the consonants or vowel decks. And as we saw before, you can draw one at a time, deciding which pile to take from as you go. Now, if you already happen to have 7 or more cards, then you won't discard any, but you also won't draw any new ones. Next, add one of these ale tokens to the crest of any monster that survived the last round. And then for each empty crest, draw and place a new modifier card beneath it, and place a new monster tile on top of that, putting the appropriate number of coins on its crest based on its newly revealed values. You then advance the round marker 1 space, and the game will continue like this until after the final round, where the visit town phase is skipped, and instead, players will total their points. I mentioned that during the setup, each player takes one of these aids, and not only does it outline all the steps of a round, but the other side tells you how points are earned. You get 3 points for each monster trophy you have, 1 point for every 2 gear cards you own, the points listed on all of your completed quests, a point for each ale token, and 1 point for every $5 in coins you have. However, you'll lose 1 point for every wound in your hand. The player with the most points wins, and in the case of a tie, the tied player with the most remaining wounds wins. But if there's still a tie, the tied players share the victory. The game also comes with solo rules using the other side of the board, but I'll leave those for you to discover on your own. Otherwise, that's everything you need to know to play Spell Smashers. Now, if you have any questions about anything you saw here, feel free to put them in the comments below, and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. You'll also find forums for discussion, pictures, and other videos over on its page at Board Game Geek, which I'll put a link to in the description below. But until the next episode, thanks for watching.